Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back to Sundering Tarot. Or if you're new here, hi, hello, and welcome. Today we're going to be visiting my underdog decks. So this is a VR to the Crochet Witch Tarot. Unfortunately, in my deck collection, there is not a single deck I have rehomed, so that aspect of the VR is going to be absent. If you've ever seen the original VR, that will not be included in this video. However, I will have one oracle and a bunch of other tarot decks that I will be covering with different aspects for this tag. So let's go ahead and get started. This will be decks that are, I guess you could say, semi-popular. They're not overly rated, they're not significantly underrated, but they're somewhat popular, and I enjoy them. So let me zoom you guys in here. This is the Heaven and Earth Tarot by Jack Sephiroth and Jamie Elford. Okay. This used to be my #1 spirituality deck before I got the Unfolding Path Tarot. Here's the backings. And as you can tell, I've banged the crap out of this deck. I've used it quite a lot. Now, this deck, as you can see from the palette tone here, it's fairly muted. A lot of people will call this a dark deck. Believe it or not, it is actually beautifully illustrated, and I've got the deck upside down. Hold on. There we go. It is beautifully illustrated, and it's nice. You get symbology, you get planets, you get elements, you get Hebrew letters, you get titles, and for like minors, you do get a keyword as well. This is the Nine of Wands, and it says great strength. So it does have quite a bit going for it. For an RWS, it's just for me, for a spirituality deck, this one kind of lowered a little bit after I got the Unfolding Path Tarot, just because the energy felt different. This deck will not pull punches at all, and that's the area this deck is a strength for me, is spirituality, and I prefer the Unfolding Path Tarot just because it's more mother energy. However, this is the deck I actually ended up learning on. It resonates just fine, and believe it or not, I did a very fantastic reading for an individual. I did a flea market event, I did a tarot booth, and I had a gentleman ask to smudge himself with my white sage. He paid me for a 3-card pull, and what I didn't expect was what the deck was going to give back to me, because it was the first time I had actually used this deck for a stranger. I had used this deck previously for Soul Tribe and for myself. And at this event, the 3 cards it gave me literally told me where he was in his spiritual evolution. What I learned afterwards, and what the cards had kind of indicated when they said that he was pretty solidified on where he was a higher evolved person, is that the person that I had done the reading for was actually a shaman. He wasn't currently practicing, but he was a shaman. And it was nice. It was a beautiful experience. This deck is capable of a lot. Quite a lot, actually. But that was my beautiful reading for it. And it surprised me because I hadn't had this deck tell me quite so bluntly in that manner for anyone that I had used it to read for. And if I remember right, the individual, the shaman that I had met, his name was Danny Cordova. Quite an interesting man. There is a certain art style with this deck. There's nothing wrong with this deck. I mean, yes, it's an RWS. Yes, it's got a muted color palette. But collectively, I think it could use a bit more love, because this deck will go the distance. It's just, it got knocked down from my #1 spirituality deck. Instead, it's my second spirituality deck now. However, even when it comes to non-spirituality readings, I can really reach for this deck and do it justice, except for the area where it's the weak point, which, if I remember right, love is the weakness of this deck. So, there you have it for it. Let's move on to the next deck. I only have 2 in this category. Remember, these are those that are semi-popular, but not the greatest known. This is the Tarot Illuminati by Eric C. Dunn. As you can see, there's the backings. This is a art style that is not me. Definitely not me. I don't like a lot of mixed media decks. I don't like collage decks and as you can see, I'm not the biggest thing on bright color. So all this stuff can be very distracting. So when I started getting drawn to this deck, I was like, why? Why? I mean, it covers a niche in my collection. However, it's not my aesthetic. This is not exactly the deck I would have chosen for myself at all. However, I kept getting drawn to it, and my ancestors wanted me to go for it. A Soul Tribe member actually bought it for me for my birthday. So I was like, okay, so even if I can't read with it, I'll probably keep it because it was a gift. And first couple times I tried to read with this deck, I got distracted. I mean, the RWS symbology is there. It does have different ethnic diversity, etc. It's really fantastic because they did use different cultures for each of the suits, which is fantastic. Something different. But when I tried to read with it, it came out all muddied. I was like, oh crap, I can't read with this deck. And then over time, I learned how to use this deck. I call this my chaos deck, and it's because when there's a lot of chaotic astrological placements, or as I said before in previous videos when I've mentioned this deck or I've had to use this deck, if it's Mercury retrograde, this deck will be clear as a bell. I will be able to read with this deck like none other. So this does have a very specific niche in my collection. Not just for the artwork, but as far as usability. So if I'm having very difficult time sussing out a regular deck that I normally read very clear with, or like I said, the astrology is very chaotic, this is the deck I reach for. Because as soon as I realize there's chaotic energy, I know they want this deck, even without being told. So it took me a minute to figure out how to utilize this deck, how to jive with it. But once I did, this deck is wonderful. It will give you a lot. And it does. It reads clearly and it simplifies things. And it will give you quite a bit of detail. And that says a lot for somebody like me who's going to be distracted by all the colors and all the little details and added things in each of the cards. So to figure out how to use it and not get distracted to the point where it doesn't bother me that this is not my thing, not my aesthetic, it is fabulous. And because this deck is, as I said, not that popular, I mean, a lot of people have heard of it. It's a low-scale barrow deck. It's also available through Llewellyn for those that shop from her publishing house. It's in this category for that reason. Otherwise, I would have it in our next category for decks, which is decks that I was not certain I was going to be able to jive with or connect with or utilize because of, for whatever reason, it wasn't my thing. And the first one is actually the Crystal Visions Tarot. Now, this is a well-known deck. This is a US Games deck. And I love the backings. I did. I fell in love with the backings. The first, I think, time I saw this was with the border. And then the next time I saw somebody who had edged it and trimmed it so the borders were missing. And that was really pretty. And I don't know if I'll do this to this deck, but this is a new acquirement in my collection. And I was like, okay, it's cheap enough. Even if I don't jive with it, I can use it for something. It'll be okay. It'll be fine. And the reason why I was worried about whether or not I was going to be able to connect to this deck is because it does have fairy energy into it. And I was like, well, I don't do any work with the fae. I don't do any work with fairies. I'm not sure I can connect to that energy and be able to read it, utilize it, and function with it in a way that will be what I need. However, I did end up having my ancestors call for this deck recently. Actually, I used it in a full moon reading. I do love that Queen of Swords, by the way. And I had no issues whatsoever using this deck. It was the very first time I had actually shuffled the deck and attempted to read with it. Because previous, I looked through all the cards, you know, I cleansed the deck, but I hadn't actually used it and ventured to find out whether or not it was usable. And they asked for it. No problems. None whatsoever. It read so beautifully. And because this does have an additional card, I thought, okay, if it comes up, that might be a problem. Maybe I might have issues with it. Fey energy, fairy energy, run around, extra cards. Maybe that will be my hang up. This card actually came out in the reading, no problem. It really struck and read clear, and it's fantastic. And I will say that the artwork feels very, I guess, yeah, I want to say like 90s fantasy art, kind of, to me. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. I have no issues with even some of the most colorful cards in this deck. It's just a simple delight, and I totally look forward to using it more. And moving on to another deck I thought maybe I would not jive with. This is Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. Okay, I actually did a dedicated video to this. It was my surprise 2022 deck. I got this deck. I knew it was going to be pip cards. I had seen this deck. I loved Nightmare Before Christmas. And I thought, okay, I could deal with this deck for just even nostalgia reasons. You know, I knew it was going to be a pip card deck because this had been all over, because it's very much a thing in set editions and a few other, the Disney villains and, what is it, Alice in Wonderland Tarot, and a couple others. They've been coming out with several decks, and they're all pip cards. And they're even posting them without showing that it's pips. Although they are getting better. I will admit they are getting better on some of the newer decks they're creating. But I was like, okay, I'm not sure I could read a pip deck. I would probably be okay for, you know, the majors, the court cards, because those have scenes. But when it came to the minors, I was like, okay, will I be able to, or will I not be able to? So this was kind of my test deck of, okay, do I know the tarot well enough now that when I come across this card, for example, the Three of Candles, which is the Three of Wands, will I remember or understand intuitively what they're trying to indicate? I discovered through a reading last December that I could read this deck. I had absolutely no trouble whatsoever, even in a big reading, even using it as the main deck in the reading and clarifying with non-pip decks that there's nothing wrong with this deck. There's nothing wrong with me reading pips. It's not a hang-up for me. And in fact, by the time the reading was over, it really hit home that I was reading more intuitively because I was using this deck. It dawned on me that I was picking up things that were not exactly the meaning of the card. And it was because I was reading more intuitively. And I sat there for like probably 5 whole minutes, stunned, of going, yeah, that just happened. So this kind of blew me away. It stunned me enough. Like I said, I did a dedicated video to it. So even though it's a pip deck, even though a lot of people hate pips, it is worth trying. I mean, I know some people say they can never read pip decks, so they've refused to buy them. However, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to buy more pip decks to test this out and make sure this one's not a fluke. But for me, this deck, it works. And it's nice. So that's the reason why it's on this list. All right, and the last category is decks that are not popular at all. So these are very much already underdog decks a lot of the time in the market. However, they work very well for me. And what can I say? All 3 of these decks that I'm going to show you are decks that I was drawn to. The first one we're going to start out with is the Tarot of Pirates. And for those of you that do not know me whatsoever, if you're new here, just visiting, stopping by, hi, hello, I have a thing for pirates. So, and I'm a water sign. So to have a pirate deck, I didn't even know there was a Tarot of Pirates, and then I stumbled across a photo from one of the photos from this deck. And I was like, hey, there's a pirate deck. Where is it? And I realized it was out of print. It's out of print. Yeah, sorry. Sorry to blow it for you. But it is out of print. I was able to get this copy because I found it on Etsy. This is the Russian version. And it does have multiple languages on it. However, I had to go clear to the Ukraine in order to get a copy of this. But I love this. There's a lot of imagery in here that says pirate to me. And yes, the artwork does feel kind of, I guess there's kind of like a comic quality to it for the art style. It's not exactly what I would call, you know, high fantasy art being used or modern art. It's more of a comic anime type artwork. And some of these can be fairly graphic. Nudity, blood, there's death. I mean, it's pirates. And how can you hate that High Priestess card right there? Hopefully you can see that without too much of a glare. It works. This totally works, and it makes perfect sense to me for a deck. And with, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean being so popular, you'd think that before this went out of print, this would be a deck that would have been more sought after. Not quite as, you know, unloved. I mean, the world card's literally a pirate map. That makes sense to me. Pirate being tried as a pirate and sentenced, that makes sense to me as the Justice card. The little wheel of the ship for the Wheel of Fortune makes sense to me. There's so much going for this deck that it kind of makes me question why it's not always the greatest, always the popular choice. If there's a different pirate deck, please let me know in the comment section down below. As far as I know, this is the only one. It's made by Los Gabriel, or at least it was. And this card right here, the Ace of Pentacles, I do have an affinity for, because as soon as I got this deck, I asked what the strength was. When I interviewed it, they gave me the Ace of Pentacles. This is a career deck for me. So the strength is career. Career, money, coins, pirate, yeah, obsessed with treasure. I laughed my butt off for probably 5 whole minutes, and I went through my entire house telling everybody else that this was a career deck. That as pirates, we are obsessed with treasure. Yes, it was fantastic. I've had really fun times with this deck. Now, will they ever, you know, bring it back into print? I don't know. And I really love this moon card. It's the Kraken taking down a ship. There's things like this that are fantastic and very well done in this deck, despite it all. I mean, Blackbeard is the devil. So if you ever are interested in this, or get your hands on a copy since it's out of print, I recommend trying it, just for the sake of trying it. And the next deck I'm going to show you is the Tarot at the End of the Rainbow. Okay, this is one that I was not certain for sure that would work for me. I was getting drawn to it. I love the Celtic vibes on it. And this reminds me so much of St. Paddy's Day. There is myths and legends. There's leprechauns. There's trolls. There's goblins. There's fairies. There's even the Headless Horseman. There's a whole bunch of things in this deck. And yes, there's rainbows aplenty. This reminds me of the month of March. And after I got this deck and felt it in my hands, I quickly discovered that this deck feels like spring. It was the first deck I've ever gotten that felt like a season to me. And this definitely says spring. So rebirth and new things and hope and yeah. And yes, this does have a little bit of, you know, fae energy into it. I mean, there's other things in here. I mean, there's literally gnomes in here. So there's more to this deck than just the fae energy. But I love it. Here's a satyr. And a lot of this is, you know, an RWS clone, but it functions well. It's not overly bright for color, but it's not totally muted either. And of course, it is a low scale barrow deck, so the downside, of course, is the guidebook or the lack thereof, because it's a little pamphlet. And I don't know if that's why this is not such a popular deck, is because it's by Low Scale Barrow. And I do love this hangman. Fairy literally catching a leprechaun trying to find his pot of gold. This is a fun deck. This is actually one of my Good Mood decks. If you haven't seen my Good Moods deck VR, this is one of those that I listed in that video. It's bright. It's cheery. It's spring. It's fantastic. And this is a very inexpensive deck, and it's worth checking out. It really is. All right, and my last deck I'm going to show you is an Oracle deck. And this is the Heal Yourself Reading Oracle cards by Ina Segal. These are oversized. I love the heart backings on it. This is a deck that is not that big. I mean, there's like 36 cards, I think, in this entire deck. So for that, I think a lot of people don't want to try this deck because it's on the thin side as far as what cards are available. But they're pretty and they're well done. They're numbered. They cover a lot of ground. There are, as you can see, procrastination. There are shadow work cards in here. It's not all just light cards. Discover your life purpose, victim consciousness. These cover a lot of ground. And yes, some of these cards can be used as majors, alchemy. So this would be your temperance card. Cycles. So world, wheel of fortune, courage. That would be your strength card. Phoenix Rising could even be a tower, temptation, devil card. There's a lot to this deck. And what's even great is the guidebook, because with each card there comes what they call an action. To whether that's a meditation, it's a certain type of practice, it's a journal prompt. There is added stuff to this deck, and it can go quite a ways, and it's fantastic to use. Not only in a spread, but if you just want to pull one card for the energy of the day, or to journal, things to, mull over. There's a lot in here. It's actually a very meaty oracle deck, despite the fact that it's not even 40 cards. All right, my lovelies, that is all the decks I have to show you from my collection that are currently my underdog decks. Let me know which ones you've seen, which ones you own, which ones you've had and you just don't get along with. Tell me why. Why did they fail? Because we are talking about underdog decks to begin with anyway. Also, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Bye.